Hi everyone, so in today's video, I'm going to chat a bit about strategies for how to enjoy audiobooks. And the key here is the word enjoy. I know there are other videos out there that talk about how to read more audiobooks or listen to more audiobooks. They come from a bit more of a productivity angle. There could be other hacks when it comes to audiobooks. But this video is really based on enjoyment. And yes, some of those productivity hacks come into play here. But what I'm really trying to center in this video is enjoyment. So if that seems like it might be of interest to you, keep watching. First off, I want to acknowledge that for some of us, audiobooks are the primary way we consume books. That might be because it's our preference or because we might have physical or mental situations that make audiobooks really the only viable option. Whatever your situation might be, whether you're reading audiobooks or listening to them because you like to or because that's really your only option, I hope some of these tips and strategies might still be helpful. All right, so tip number one is to couple listening to audiobooks with other activities. And I know this is the most standard advice or tip out there, but I wanted to take a little bit of time to dive into this a bit more and how it relates to enjoyment, at least for me. So when it comes to enjoying an audiobook while I'm doing another activity, there are two categories that I'm thinking about. The first are activities that I don't really enjoy. So if I listen to an audiobook, that activity becomes more enjoyable. For example, I do not enjoy driving in Baltimore traffic. I don't mind driving, but city traffic is just really unpleasant for me. So when I pop on an audiobook or listen to an audiobook, it makes that activity, especially during rush hour, so much more enjoyable. Now, there are other activities that I don't have really strong feelings about, but listening to an audiobook makes them more enjoyable. I really can't watch too much TV when I fly. I tend to get motion sickness still, so listening to an audiobook passes the time, especially on long-haul flights, quite quickly for me. So the second category when it comes to coupling audiobooks with another activity are activities that I already enjoy doing and that by listening to an audiobook, it enhances the experience. The quickest thing that comes to mind here is sometimes I just like to decompress and play some games on my phone. And with certain games especially that don't involve a lot of words like crosswords or a lot of thinking, I do enjoy listening to an audiobook when I'm playing these games. So it's like double decompressing for me and enjoyment. So the second tip I have for enjoying audiobooks is figuring out a nice audio system that works for you. Now, sometimes we're just stuck with whatever audio we have. For example, if I'm listening to an audiobook in the car, I'm stuck with my car's audio system, which is perfectly fine for me. But there are other instances in which I have a bit more control. For example, if I'm walking around outside and I want to listen to an audiobook, or I'm cleaning inside and I still want to be able to hear what's going on around my surroundings, I actually really like these over-ears bone conduction headphones because I can still listen to what's happening in the audiobook, but be cognizant of my surroundings. And I personally like these more than AirPods or in-ear headphones because my ears are oddly small and those never really fit properly for me. And I know bone conduction software or technology, some people don't like it, but for me, I really enjoy it. And I'll link what I use below along with any other tech recommendations I might have. So the second piece of audio equipment that helps me enjoy audiobooks are noise canceling headphones. Now, I have a pair of Bose headphones that are, I think, 5 to 6 years old at this point, and I will use them until they don't work anymore. But I really enjoy using these on an airplane because it really cancels out that noise and I can be immersed in the audiobook, as well as at night when I might be playing a game on my phone and I just really want to hear that audiobook well. So again, you don't need to have fancy headphones, but being cognizant of your audio tech might help you enjoy audiobooks a bit more. All right, so the next set of tips I have are around the audiobook itself. So tip number 3 is adjusting your playback speed. Now, I only started doing this in the last year or so, and I really don't know why I waited so long to do this. So if you're in your audiobook, you can adjust the playback speed. There's a normal speed, which is usually 1.0, but there are also different playback speeds where you can increase the speed to make the narration a bit quicker or decrease the speed to make it slower. Now, I know that there are folks out there who want to get through a lot of audiobooks, so they automatically ramp up the playback speed to 2x or 3x. I'm not judging that at all. But for enjoyment's sake, I would say playing around with the speed to where it makes it really enjoyable to listen to the book and you're not thinking like, oh, I wish they would speak faster, or oh my gosh, they're speaking so fast. So just play around with the dials to see what might work for you. These days, I'm tending to listen to books around 1.25 to 1.5 speed, but again, it really depends on the narrator. So yeah, this tip is just basically play around with these playback speeds to figure out what works for you in a certain book. And again, this might vary depending on the narrator, but more on narrators soon. All right, moving on to tip number 4 is to find an audiobook, especially writing, that fits your listening preferences. I'll be completely honest, there are certain books that I just enjoy physically reading, whether as a physical book or as an ebook, more than listening, whereas there are other books that I just rather listen to as opposed to read as an ebook or a physical book. Now, when trying to figure out my audiobook listening preferences, there are 4 things that I evaluate to see whether it might be a fit for me. The first thing I evaluate is diction, so essentially what words are being used. And within diction, I'm considering 2 things. The first thing is hearing the pronunciations of certain words. Now, when it comes to translated works, I find this especially useful, or any novel that heavily uses words or names that might not be as common in the English language. For example, I'm thinking of the audiobook or book, The Mountain and the Sea. There are a lot of names and places where I probably wouldn't have known how to pronounce it, but listening to it helped me have a better idea of that pronunciation. So yeah, when it comes to diction and figuring out pronunciation, audiobooks are definitely helpful for that. However, on the other side of it is that there might be diction that's used that's very specific to a place or time that might feel personally complex to me. And in that instance, I do much better if I can read those words. So something to consider is just complexity here. You learn a bit better by hearing things, then audiobooks might be more helpful and enjoyable for more complex works. Or if you just enjoy seeing things that are a bit more complex, if you're slightly bit more of a visual learner in that respect, then maybe opting for an ebook or a physical book in that instance might be more helpful. But at the end of the day, I do consider complexity when it comes to diction and my potential enjoyment of a specific audiobook. The second thing I evaluate is pacing. Now, I personally can consume audiobooks that are slow, medium, and fast-paced, but you might have a preference, and that might dictate how you might enjoy an audiobook, so it's just something to consider. Now, as soon as an audiobook or novel is described as atmospheric, where you're just really getting immersed in that world, I tend to opt to listen to those as audiobooks, which brings me to the next point in evaluating my listening preferences, is whether a novel, especially fiction, might be more plot-driven or character-driven. And I tend to enjoy listening to character-driven books more than actually physically reading them. But when it comes to plot-driven books, I'm happy to listen to them or physically read them. So it's just something for you to evaluate if you start noticing that, oh, okay, I tend to enjoy audiobooks with more of a plot, and I like fast-paced books or any of the other things I've mentioned as well. Now, the last component of thinking about listening preferences, at least for me, is genres. Now, genres isn't as relevant for me today because I tend to listen to a lot of different types of audiobooks, but it might be for you. So it might be worth thinking if there are certain genres like romance or nonfiction or magical realism or any other sort of genre that you just enjoy listening to more. And if that's the case, then definitely listen to them. But this also leads to my next tip in terms of enjoying audiobooks is think about expanding your horizons. Now, this tip might not seem as straightforward, but bear with me. I enjoy audiobooks and books in general because I do love learning things. I love that it helps me think and think in different ways. And audiobooks, by its nature, is a different medium and format than ebooks or physical books. So it offers the potential to consume knowledge and enjoy material in a different way and have a different experience. And sometimes that lends itself to experiencing books that I might not have if I were just solely confined to reading them as an ebook or a physical book. All right, so let me provide some concrete examples. So when it comes to nonfiction, for example, I tend to read that a lot in my academic work. So when it comes to reading nonfiction books, I'm not really craving them often. However, I notice that I do enjoy listening to nonfiction audiobooks, especially when I'm driving. So there are books like Ethan Kross's Chatter that I probably wouldn't have read as a physical book or ebook, but listening to it as an audiobook was quite enjoyable, and I learned a lot about psychology from that book. I also noticed in myself that when it comes to books that are more character studies, I enjoy listening to those as audiobooks more than reading them as physical books or ebooks. One example of this is An Unnecessary Woman, and this book really is a character study of this elderly female protagonist in Beirut in Lebanon. And the writing's fantastic and the pacing is a bit slower, and I likely would have put it down and probably not picked it up again if I was reading it as an ebook or a physical book. But as an audiobook, I was just able to keep up with its pacing and just get lost in this protagonist's world. Now, An Unnecessary Woman was a slower paced book, and I do find myself listening to more slower paced books than if I would have tried to read them on my own as an ebook or a physical book. And so in general, when it comes to expanding my horizons, I am consuming a bit more slower paced books in an audiobook format. And in general, the sentiment here is that there are books that I probably wouldn't have read as an ebook or physical book, but I was far more open to listening to them. For example, the wildly popular book Remarkably Bright Creatures. It's a book I honestly wouldn't have bought or reserved, or if I did, I probably would have DNF'd it for various reasons. But I really enjoyed the audiobook so much that I kept up with the book and was able to finish it and just enjoy it. So that brings me to my last tip, which I have a lot to say on, and that is find a good narrator. Now, narration truly makes or breaks an audiobook. I really encourage you, before buying an audiobook or even placing a hold for it at your local library, to sample a preview of it to see how you feel about the narration. Usually you know how you're feeling about 10 to 15 seconds in, but even giving a book a minute of a listen can help you determine whether the narration would be something you might enjoy or not. Now, when it comes to audiobook narration, it usually falls into 3 categories. The first is there's a single narrator who narrates the whole book. They might put on different voices for different characters, but it's really one person who's narrating that book. The second is 2 people who might be narrating an audiobook, and they might occupy different gender identities, different ages, different whatever, but there are 2 narrators that are usually playing to at least 2 different characters in a given book. And when it comes to enjoyment, I say you should at least enjoy one of the narrators, ideally both, but this is just something to think about when you're perhaps checking out or purchasing an audiobook, to see if both narrators are people you enjoy listening to. Finally, there's ensemble narrations where you have a bunch of people narrating audiobooks, and it feels almost like a theater show or a TV show that you're listening to. And for me, I'm kind of ambivalent towards these. I don't mind them either way, but for other people, they might feel a bit busy, or they just really might like that theatrical element. So it's just something to consider as you're evaluating various audiobook narrators and narration types. Now, in trying to find a good audiobook narrator, good means different things to different people. And one helpful starting point might be to look at various audiobook reviews. Now, this could be on sites that sell audiobooks like Audible. You don't have to have a membership to look at the reviews, but this could help point you in the right direction of audiobooks that you might enjoy listening to. And with any review, please take it with a grain of salt. One narrator that one person might love, another might not. Another thing to consider that could be as contentious as reviews are audiobook awards. Now, there are two popular audiobook awards that you could start your research with. The first are the Audies, and they're put on by the Audio Publishers Association, and I believe this is an yearly award. So check out who the finalists and the winners are, and you might find some good audiobook suggestions there. The next one is from Audiophile Magazine, and those are their earphone awards, and it seems like almost a monthly award, but I could be mistaken. And they provide lists and in-depth reviews of great narration that you can check out, and I have links to both of them below. Now, just like with reviews, there are biases that go into any of the awards, so if you are perusing some winners or finalists of certain awards and they're just not vibing with you, there is nothing wrong with you. Everyone has different preferences, and it's totally okay. It's truly just a starting point to help you in figuring out your listening preferences when it comes to audiobook narrators. Now, when it comes to booktube, I know there aren't as many audiobook review videos out there, and that's something I'm hoping to do a bit more on this channel. But in the meantime, if you're curious what my favorite audiobooks of 2023 were, check out this video here. That's all for this video. I hope you found these tips useful on how to enjoy audiobooks, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.